Today we're explaining coding, interviews the psychological torture chamber, where we ask engineers to solve algorithmic puzzles on whiteboards while strangers judge their every semicolon. Not the clean demonstrate your problem-solving skills version from HR, but the real implementation where you forget how to reverse a string, your handwriting looks like a seizure, and you realize memorizing 500 LeetCode problems has replaced actual software engineering skills. 3 engineers, one who survived 47 coding interviews to land at Google, and 45 minutes of pure whiteboard warfare. I'm Sam, and someone just asked me to invert a binary tree without Google.
I failed 23 coding interviews before I got good at this psychological game. 23. The job postings make it sound reasonable, solve problems similar to your daily work. Reality. I spent 6 months memorizing dynamic programming patterns that I've never used in 5 years of production code. I can implement Dijkstra's algorithm on a whiteboard, but I Google how to center a div.
My job is conducting these fucking interviews. You know what I see? Brilliant engineers who can design distributed systems but panic when asked to find 2 numbers that sum to a target. We're testing algorithm memorization, not engineering competence. I've rejected candidates who later built unicorn startups.
I study the psychological impact of coding interviews. Spoiler alert, they're designed to induce performance anxiety and imposter syndrome. Standing at a whiteboard while strangers watch you code triggers fight or flight responses that have nothing to do with job performance.
Dr. Kim, you're our guide through this psychological hellscape. Maya and Carlos, prepare to explain why algorithmic trivia became the career gatekeeper. No mercy, no hand-waving about problem-solving skills.
Let's start simple. What is a coding interview actually testing?
Officially, problem-solving ability, coding skills, and algorithmic thinking. Realistically, your ability to memorize solutions to specific problem patterns and perform under artificial pressure while strangers judge your handwriting.
Why do companies use this format?
Because it's standardized and scalable. Google can't give every candidate a month-long trial project, so they invented this 45-minute algorithm Olympics. It filters people, but it's unclear if it filters for job-relevant skills or just LeetCode grinding ability.
What are the psychological pressures unique to whiteboard coding?
Everything is backwards. No IDE, no Stack Overflow, no error checking, no copy-paste. You're coding in a medium you never use while people watch every syntax error. It's like asking a pianist to perform surgery. Technically, both use fine motor skills, but completely different contexts.
How does performance anxiety affect coding ability?
Stress hormones literally impair working memory and logical reasoning. I've watched senior engineers forget how to iterate through arrays because their cortisol levels are through the roof. We're testing stress response, not programming skills.
What's the most common mistake engineers make in these interviews?
Jumping straight to code without understanding the problem. I used to start writing immediately because silence felt awkward. Now I spend 5 to 10 minutes asking clarifying questions and working through examples. The interviewer wants to see your thought process, not just the final solution.
What about the infamous optimize this follow-up question?
Pure sadism, you solve the problem, feel good about yourself, then they say, can you do better? It's designed to test if you know advanced algorithms and data structures. Most of the time, the optimal solution involves obscure techniques you'll never use in production.
How has LeetCode culture changed software engineering?
Created a parallel curriculum. Computer science programs teach algorithms for understanding computational complexity. LeetCode teaches algorithms for passing interviews. They're related but different skills. I know engineers who can solve hard problems but struggle with real system design.
What's the time investment for interview preparation?
Insane? Candidates spend 6 to 12 months grinding LeetCode for interviews that last 45 minutes. That's hundreds of hours preparing for tests that poorly correlate with job performance. It's like studying Latin to become a doctor, historically relevant, but practically useless.
Let's talk about specific problem categories. What are the classics?
2 pointers, sliding window, binary search, DFS, BFS, dynamic programming. These patterns cover 80% of interview problems. It's not about creativity, it's about recognizing which pattern applies and implementing the standard solution. Pattern matching, not problem solving.
Why are tree and graph problems so popular in interviews?
Because they're recursive, which looks smart, and they have clear optimal solutions that interviewers can grade objectively. Invert a binary tree became famous because it's simple to state but requires understanding tree structure. Plus, it humbled a bunch of overconfident engineers.
What about dynamic programming problems?
Pure hazing, DP problems are the organic chemistry of computer science, mostly useless in practice but great for weeding people out. I've never written a DP solution in production, but I had to memorize the coin change problem to get hired.
How do you handle the psychological pressure during the interview?
Talk through your thinking constantly. Silence makes interviewers nervous and makes you seem stuck. Even if you're unsure, verbalize your approach. I'm thinking this might be a 2-pointer problem because it shows your reasoning process and buys you time.
What about syntax errors and bugs on the whiteboard?
They're inevitable and expected. I always tell interviewers up front, I'll likely make syntax errors since I don't have autocomplete. Most interviewers are understanding, but some sadists will nitpick missing semicolons. Know your audience.
How has remote interviewing changed coding interviews?
CoderPad and HackerRank improve the technical experience. You get syntax highlighting and can actually run code. But screen sharing adds new anxiety. Technical issues become part of the evaluation, and you lose the collaborative feel of standing at a whiteboard together.
What's the biggest disconnect between interview problems and real work?
Interviews test algorithmic puzzle solving. Real work is reading documentation, debugging existing code, and making incremental improvements to large systems. I spend more time on code reviews than implementing algorithms, but interviews don't test collaboration skills.
How do you study for these interviews effectively?
Focus on patterns, not individual problems. Learn the template for 2 pointers, then apply it to 10 different problems. Don't memorize solutions, understand the underlying approach. And practice explaining your thinking out loud, even when coding alone.
What about the time management aspect?
Budget 5 minutes for understanding the problem, 10 minutes for approach and examples, 25 minutes for coding, and 5 minutes for testing. If you're stuck after 15 minutes, ask for hints. Interviewers prefer seeing you struggle and recover than watching you fail silently.
What's the most damaging myth about coding interviews?
That they're meritocratic. Coding interviews favor people with time to grind LeetCode, formal CS education, and cultural familiarity with American interview norms. They systematically exclude talented engineers who learn differently or can't afford months of interview prep.
Final question, are coding interviews getting better or worse?
Worse, as more people game the system by memorizing solutions, companies respond with harder, more obscure problems. It's an arms race where both sides lose. Candidates waste time on irrelevant prep. Companies miss good engineers who can't play the game.
And everyone's pretending it makes sense. We've convinced ourselves that inverting binary trees predicts engineering success because admitting the system is broken would mean redesigning hiring from scratch. Easier to keep the broken status quo.
Jesus Christ, so we're asking engineers to perform algorithmic circus tricks on whiteboards while strangers judge their handwriting, and we've convinced ourselves this predicts job performance. This is fine.
Welcome to 2025. We've gamified hiring to the point where memorizing LeetCode patterns matters more than building actual software. The inmates are running the asylum.
This episode was brought to you by Engineer Panic, where we strip away the interview hype and show you the psychological warfare reality. Because understanding why you failed 23 interviews despite being a competent engineer is probably important. We're back. Let's talk about the practical nightmare of actually surviving these psychological torture sessions. Maya, what's the most counterintuitive advice you'd give?
Embrace the artificial constraints. Don't fight the fact that it's nothing like real coding. Lean into the performance aspect. Practice coding without autocomplete. Get comfortable with syntax errors. Learn to think out loud. It's theater, not engineering.
Start with brute force solutions. Interviewers want to see that you can solve the problem first, optimize second. A working ON2 solution beats a broken ON log and attempt every time. Get something working, then improve it.
And manage the power dynamic. Remember that the interviewer wants you to succeed. Hiring is expensive and time-consuming. They're not trying to trick you, they're trying to gather signal about your problem-solving process.
What about the biggest mistakes you see candidates make?
Giving up too early. I see candidates declare, I don't know, after 30 seconds of thinking. The struggle is part of the evaluation. Work through examples, think out loud, ask clarifying questions. Show your reasoning even if you don't know the optimal solution.
Not testing their solution. After coding, trace through with a simple example. Catch obvious bugs before the interviewer does. It shows attention to detail and systematic thinking. Plus, most whiteboard solutions have off-by-one errors.
And over-engineering solutions. Some candidates try to handle every edge case and write production-ready code. The interviewer wants to see core logic, not exception handling. Keep it simple and correct.
What keeps you up at night about the current state of technical hiring?
That we're optimizing for the wrong skills. I know amazing engineers who can't pass these interviews and mediocre engineers who have gamed the system. We're selecting for test-taking ability, not engineering competence.
The opportunity cost. Every hour spent grinding LeetCode is an hour not spent building real projects, contributing to open source, or learning technologies that actually matter. We're incentivizing the wrong behaviors.
That everyone knows it's broken, but nobody wants to change it. Companies stick with coding interviews because they're objective and fair, but they're really just systematically biased in a different way.
Any final advice for engineers stuck in the system?
Play the game, but don't lose yourself in it. Do the LeetCode grind if you want FANG jobs, but remember it's not real engineering. Keep building actual projects and solving real problems. Don't let algorithm puzzles become your entire identity.
Look for companies that are experimenting with better hiring processes. Some places are doing project-based interviews, pair programming sessions, or work trials. Vote with your applications for processes that actually assess job-relevant skills.
Remember that failure doesn't reflect your worth as an engineer. These interviews are artificial tests with high false negative rates. If you bomb an interview, it might say more about the process than about your abilities.
This has been Engineer Panic. We've learned that coding interviews are psychological warfare disguised as technical assessment. LeetCode grinding replaced actual skill development, and everyone knows it's broken, but we're stuck with it anyway. Sweet dreams.
Thanks for the therapy session. Now I'm going back to practicing tree traversals for the algorithm I'll never use in my actual job that involves reading Kubernetes configs.
And I need to design interview questions that somehow predict job performance while conforming to our broken standardized testing framework. The cognitive dissonance continues.
Keep coding, keep building, keep questioning why we test algorithms when we need engineers. The system will change when enough people demand better, but until then, survive the game.
This has been Engineer Panic, where coding interviews meet psychological trauma. Until next time, remember, just because you can't invert a binary tree on a whiteboard doesn't mean you can't build the next unicorn.